In the previous two videos we looked at the Lagomarsino Numeria 9203 mechanical calculator, firstly in the condition it arrived, completely seized, with missing or broken parts, and many of the keytops falling apart. We then freed the seized mechanism, repaired some damaged parts inside, and also dismantled the carriage to replace a missing pin, freeing up some seized wheels along the way. When we left the machine, it was working, but it was still missing a clearing handle, 100 keytops, and some feet. For the keytops, I 3D printed replacements, copying the design right down to the font for the numbers. Unfortunately, with 3D printing, it's not quite as simple as pressing a button and out comes the finished product. The sprue from the printing process, where the item adheres to the print bed, needs to be trimmed off each key by hand. And 3D prints traditionally have a rather ridged finish, which needed to be sanded smooth. Starting off with the concave top face, I used a grinding stone in a Dremel to do the bulk of this work. And then all 100 keys were sanded by hand on all 5 visible faces, also smoothing the corners at the same time. That just left the recessed number to be painted before a final sand to remove any excess paint. This was a trial attempt that I filmed. I came up with a slightly better system by using a thinner paint which flowed into the recess rather than going all over the top surface, but it was still a far from perfect method. Next came the feet. The original feet had perished away into a sticky mess. They have a shaped section on the underside that fits into a recess on the base of the machine. They also have a shouldered screw and an embedded washer in the rubber, so I need to cut away the old rubber to release the screw and washer, ready to reuse these in the new feet. So with a little bit of 3D modelling, we have a design for the main part of the new feet ready to send to the printer. And here are the finished articles. There's a square of rubber bonded onto each foot to stop it sliding around when in use. The washers are already inserted into each foot, and the other side is shaped to fit the recess on the machine. Lastly, instead of the old split pin that a previous owner had attached as a carriage clearing handle, we now have a replacement handle and knob ready to fit to the machine. And with all that done, we've come to the moment you've all been waiting for, the big reveal. Bear in mind that I was never intending to make this machine look as new, so it's still going to be scruffy. And so here goes. One fully functional Lagomarsino Numeria 9203 calculator, complete with 101 new keytops, if I include the clearing button, and a knob for the main crank handle, and a replacement clearing handle, and not forgetting, of course, the new feet. I rather like the appearance of this machine. It has a chunky and purposeful look, and the original detailing on the back of the case is nice, even down to the original dealer's plate, Stafford's Typewriter Company of Stanley Street, Liverpool. So the next thing to do is to demonstrate how it works. It's more or less the same as other mechanical calculators. To add numbers, you type the first number into the keyboard and crank the handle forwards. So if I enter 9203 and crank the handle, that number will be added into the output register. You'll also notice that the counter now shows 1 because we've turned the handle 1 time. That's of little importance for normal addition and subtraction, but we'll be looking at that again when we come to the multiplication. Now if I enter another number, so I'll type 3142 into the keyboard and crank the handle again, it gives us the answer of 12345. Subtraction is pretty simple. If I want to subtract 11,279 from the 12,345, I'll enter the 11,279 on the keyboard and then turn the handle backwards to subtract that amount, leaving us with the answer of 1066. On most mechanical calculators, there are movable markers to indicate the position of the decimal point, or the commas between the thousands. In the case of this machine, it has preset dots on these rotating four-sided bars. So in this position, it's showing 2 characters after the dot, ideal for currency, or in this position, which has the dot every 3 places to indicate the thousands. You'll notice that every time I've turned the crank handle so far, the keys pop back up. You can also clear the entire keyboard by pressing the clear button here, or you can clear a single column by pressing the button at the bottom of that column. If you enter the wrong number in a column, you can change it by simply pressing another button, like this. To clear the register, you use the clearing handle. Turning it forwards clears the counter, and turning it backwards clears the output register. So next we can look at multiplication. The first thing to do is to move this lever into the multiply and divide position. This stops the keyboard from being cleared each time you crank the handle. So if I want to multiply 1984 by 7, I enter the 1984 into the keyboard, and then crank the handle forwards 7 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now you can see that the 1984, which is still showing on the keyboard, has been multiplied by 7, which is shown in the counter, giving us the answer of 13,888, which is shown in the register. But if we want to multiply by something more than a single digit number, we can use the carriage shifting knob here to move the carriage from the units column into the tens column, hundreds column, or thousands column, and so on. So if I want to multiply my 1984 by 372, in the units column I crank the handle twice, and then shift the carriage into the tens position and crank the handle 7 times, and then shift the carriage again and crank the handle 3 times. So as before, you can see that we've multiplied 1984, which is showing on the keyboard, by 372, which is showing in the counter, giving us the answer of 738,048 in the register. And finally, for division, you need to move the carriage all the way to the right. You can either use the shifting knob as before, or you can simply lift the carriage and slide it by hand. So first we need to enter a number to divide. If I want to divide 555,525 by 45, I'll enter the 555,525 on the keyboard and add that into the register by turning the handle forwards. Next I need to clear the counter because that's where the answer will appear. Also, make sure the lever is in the multiply and divide position. So now I can enter 45 into the keyboard and crank the handle backwards to subtract it from the register. And I'll keep cranking until I hear the bell ring, which indicates that the register has underflowed, at which point I crank the handle forwards to clear the underflow, and then shift the carriage 1 place to the left, and this process of cranking the handle backwards until the bell rings, then cranking forwards 1 turn to clear the underflow, and shifting the carriage 1 place to the left, is repeated until I get to the end of the carriage, or the calculation works out exactly, or I have enough decimal places for the calculation I'm working on. In this case it's worked out exactly, because the register is now showing all zeros, and the answer of 55,525 divided by 45 equals 12345, which is shown in the counter. So now there's just a couple more features to look at. The counter on the Lagomarsino doesn't carry into the next column. So if I was adding up a big list of numbers and I wanted to know how many additions I'd made, for instance if I wanted to calculate the average value, then the counter wouldn't help me much. But if I press the number 1 in the far left column and slide this lever across, that locks the number 1 down, so if I now press the clear button, the number 1 stays down. So I'll add up this big list of numbers. I'll speed this bit up so it's not quite so tedious. And then at the end we should have a total for the number of additions made. And now that's done, we have a total of 966 in the register. You can ignore the counter because that's a meaningless figure. But over on the left-hand side of the register, we have the item counter showing that we have added 23 items. So to calculate the average, I can release the item counter lock lever and clear the number 1, and then clear the counter and register, and shift the carriage across to the right, and enter the 966 into the keyboard and crank the handle forwards to add that into the register on the left-hand side. And then clear the counter, and then put the lever into the multiply and divide position, and enter 23 into the keyboard. And now I can crank the handle backwards until the bell rings, and crank the handle forwards to clear the underflow, and then shift the carriage and repeat this procedure until we get to the end of the division. And now we have all zeros in the register showing us that it worked out exactly. So the average value of the 23 numbers on our list is shown in the counter, and the answer is, of course, 42. So now for the last additional feature on this machine. It has a split clearing register. If I just add ones all the way across the keyboard and crank the handle and then clear the register, everything returns to 0. But if I move this lever to the left and repeat that operation, only the right hand side of the register is cleared, the left hand side remains in place. This could be used if you wanted to retain the item count whilst still being able to clear the rest of the result in the register. But it can also be used as a primitive memory function or storage register if I centralise the carriage like this. Say for instance I was adding up accounts for several customers, but I also wanted an overall sales figure. Customer number 1 bought 15 items costing £12.99, giving a total of £194.85. There's no automatic method to transfer this amount, so I manually type it on the left hand side of the keyboard and crank the handle once. Now I can clear the counter and register, but the amount remains on the left hand side. Now if customer number 2 bought 27 items costing £1.99 and 5 items costing £8.99, giving a total of £98.68. Again, I can manually enter that figure on the left hand side of the keyboard and crank the handle, and now I'm free to clear the counter and register again, and the running total of £293.53 remains on the left hand side. Obviously it wouldn't really be worth the bother for a small list like this, but don't forget they didn't have spreadsheets in those days, so a little trick like this could come in rather handy. I think that will do for this video. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to click on the bell icon so you get notifications when future videos are released. If you found this set of videos helpful in repairing or using your own machine, and you feel so inclined, you can leave a PayPal donation to help create future videos using the link in the description, but that's totally voluntary. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.